Rain hammered the windows like fists, demanding entry. I listened to it beat against the glass as I sat at my desk, watching the candle's flame dance and shrink with each gust that found its way through the ancient frame. The thunder, distant, sullen, sounded like the city itself was grumbling in its sleep. The letter before me bore just 3 words in my cramped hand. To whom might need me? Presumptuous, perhaps, yet experience had taught me someone always would, eventually. The uncanny has a way of finding those who've glimpsed it, like iron filings to a magnet. I reached for my notebook, its black leather worn, smooth at the corners from years of anxious thumbing. The pages fell open naturally to the charred remains of my notes on the Angel Meadow affair. I turned past them quickly, past hasty sketches of symbols carved in door frames, past the smeared ink of recorded testimonies. Finally, a clean sheet, pristine, waiting. A knock through the wall froze my hand mid-reach for the pen. 3 sharp raps, evenly spaced. I didn't move. The hall lamp hadn't flickered when I'd returned home. No footsteps had creaked the stairs. No shadow had passed beneath the door. The knock did not repeat. It never did. It just served as a reminder for my new way of living. My right leg throbbed dully as I uncorked my flask. Brandy tonight, not water. Some vigils required fortification of a different sort. The liquor burned pleasantly, loosening the knot of tension between my shoulders. I dipped my pen and began to write, the nib scratching against paper like a small animal burrowing for safety. This begins with a door that I shouldn't have opened. The words flowed easier after that. Perhaps the brandy helped. Perhaps it was simply relief in finally committing to paper what had haunted me. The rain continued its assault on my windows, and I wrote by candlelight as Manchester drowned beneath the deluge. My hand trembled slightly as I wrote, memories rising like corpses from the depths of a lake. Autumn, 1890. The fog rolled through Angel Meadow like a living thing, wrapping itself around lampposts and clinging to cobblestones. It had the consistency of old breath, warm and stale. I adjusted my uniform collar against the chill. Inspector's badge polished that morning, notebook fresh and unmarked. The weight of my truncheon at my hip reassured me as I stepped over a gutter streaming with filth. 5th one this month, Constable Meeks had said at the station, sliding the report across my desk. Little girl, 7 years old, Mary Thorne. Mother swears she put her to bed. Woke to an empty cot. No signs of forced entry. Just like the others. No screams, no blood, no body, just gone. I moved deeper into the slum, past gaunt-faced children who scattered at the sight of my uniform. A woman with gin-blossomed cheeks and hollow eyes watched from a doorway, clutching a shawl tight against her throat. "Ma'am," I called, tipping my hat. "Might I have a word?" She didn't run, which was something. "You're asking about the children?" Not a question. News travelled fast in Angel Meadow. "I am. Have you seen anything unusual? Anyone who doesn't belong?" She glanced over her shoulder, then leaned closer. The smell of cheap gin washed over me. It's her that takes them. The thin woman who sings beneath the floors. Does this woman have a name? None that should be spoken. She made a warding gesture, thumb between first and middle fingers. She comes through walls when the moon's dark. I wrote it down, though I'd heard variations a dozen times that week. The vicar at St. Michael's blamed Satan's influence in the gin shops. My superintendent suggested opium dens, using children as couriers. The newspapers hinted at foreigners. But I was looking for someone clever, someone hidden, someone real. I thanked the woman and continued deeper into the warren of courts and alleyways. The slum had its own geography, its own rules. Maps were useless here. My pocket watch ticked sluggishly as I walked, the mechanism struggling in the damp as I drifted past the charnel house with its sweet, sick smell, past the gin shop where men drank themselves blind to forget the mills, past the chapel where children learned their letters for twopence a week. Something pulled me eastward, toward the oldest part of the meadow, an instinct. The condemned tenement loomed suddenly through the fog, taller than I remembered. 5 stories of blackened brick and boarded windows. Condemned after the cholera outbreak of '83, its front door had been bricked up, sealed like a tomb. Except, I stepped closer, heart quickening. The bricks that had sealed the entrance were scattered across the ground, as if pushed outward from within. The door itself stood ajar, a sliver of absolute darkness visible in the gap. I pulled out my notebook, jotted the time and location, procedure, order, sense. Inspector? A voice behind me. Constable Fletcher, young and eager, assigned to shadow me that day, jobbed up behind me, pleased to have found me finally. I never enjoyed having a charge with me. I worked better alone. Shouldn't we wait for reinforcements? He asked breathlessly. I stared at that sliver of darkness. Something whispered to me from within. No time, I said, tucking away my notebook. We're losing daylight. I drew my truncheon and stepped toward the door that shouldn't have opened. The brick crumbled beneath my shoulder as I forced my way through. Plaster dust billowed, coating my uniform in pale powder. I coughed, waving away the cloud with one hand, truncheon gripped tight in the other. Fletcher, stay by the entrance. If I'm not back in 20 minutes, fetch the sergeant. Sir, regulations state 20 minutes, I repeated, already stepping into the darkness. The foyer swallowed me. The stench hit first, abandonment and rot. Beneath it, something sharper, burning wax, and the smell of meat left too long in summer heat, but colder, older. I struck a match. The tiny flame revealed peeling wallpaper, a grand staircase sagging with rot. Soot stained the ceiling in strange, swirling patterns that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. The air hung motionless. No drafts, no sounds from the street outside, as if the building existed in its own pocket of time. A clock on the wall had stopped at 3:17, its face cracked, exposing the broken timepiece inside. I noted it in my book, then froze as I heard it, a soft mechanical ticking, but the hands remained still. My gaze swept left, a discarded pocket watch, its brass gleaming through the pile of debris. Picking it up, I opened the face and noticed its second hand jerked anti-clockwise, tick by tick, unwinding time. I swallowed hard, mouth suddenly dry. Hello, police? Is anyone here? My voice fell flat, absorbed by the walls. I moved deeper into what must have been a parlour, chairs arranged in a perfect circle, as if for a séance. In the centre, a small table with a single candle still burning. The wax hadn't melted. The flame didn't flicker. Portraits lined the walls, men and women in the early style made popular during our Queen Victoria's reign, stiff-backed and solemn. Every face had been methodically scraped away, leaving only blank ovals of raw canvas. My notes became erratic as I moved from room to room. Furniture arranged in geometric patterns, windows that showed only brick walls when they should have opened to the street. A child's doll with baby teeth sewn into its smile. The building was larger inside than it appeared from without. Corridors stretched and doubled back on themselves. I found it difficult to keep track of my location and where to find the exit. I descended another level. The air grew colder, damper. My match guttered out, and I fumbled for another, fingers suddenly clumsy. A woman's voice drifted up from below, soft, melodic, a lullaby. I followed it down a narrow staircase, the steps creaking beneath my weight. The cellar door was sealed with heavy chains, each link inscribed with symbols I didn't recognize. They looked ancient, older than the building, older than the city itself. The lock had been broken recently. I pushed through. The singing stopped. The cellar stretched before me, impossibly vast. My match illuminated only a small circle, beyond which lurked absolute darkness. The floor had been excavated, revealing a pit carved into the earth. Its edges were inscribed with the same symbols from the chains, spiraling down into the depths. I edged closer. The pit was deep as a grave, perhaps deeper. At the bottom lay bones, femurs, ribs, skulls, some human, others longer, wrongly jointed, with too many vertebrae or teeth in configurations no human mouth could hold. My hands shook as I made rough sketches in my notebook. Evidence, proof, something to make sense of what I was seeing. The singing began again, directly beneath me, beneath the pit, beneath the bones. A woman's voice, sweet and terrible, singing words I couldn't understand, but somehow knew were ancient. I leaned forward, straining to see deeper into the darkness. Alaric. Not a sound, a presence inside my skull, unfurling like smoke. My name, spoken in a voice that felt like fingernails scraping bone. I staggered back, dropping my notebook. Who's there? I've waited long for you, child of soot and iron. The voice pressed against the inside of my skull, intimate as a lover's whisper. My vision blurred. Blood trickled from my nose. Show yourself, I demanded, but my voice cracked. So brave, so blind. Do you think your little laws protect you here? This place was mine before your city had a name. Something moved in the pit. Bones shifted, rattled. A hand emerged, long-fingered, grey as ash, with too many joints. Then another. They gripped the edge of the pit. I stumbled backwards, truncheon raised. My back hit the wall. There was no exit. The door was gone. The thing pulled itself up, unfolding like a spider, limbs bent at impossible angles. Its face, no, I won't describe its face. Even now, years later, I can't bear to remember it clearly. Thank God for that small mercy. It lunged. I swung my truncheon, connecting with nothing but air. Pain exploded in my right knee as something tore through flesh and shattered bone. I screamed, collapsing. The thing loomed over me, its breath like grave soil. You'll carry my mark now. You'll hear my song in your dreams. I crawled, dragging my ruined leg, leaving a trail of blood on stone. The walls seemed to breathe. The symbols on the floor began to glow with a sickly light. My hand found something cold, metal, a discarded spade. I swung blindly. The thing shrieked, a sound like breaking glass and tearing silk. I struck again, felt resistance, then release. I'm not sure how. My mind railed against the horror I witnessed, but somehow I found the stairs. Somehow I climbed, pulling myself up each step, each movement sending white-hot agony through my shattered knee. I recall, behind me, the singing grew louder, the air thickened, hands scrabbled at my boots. I clawed through the cellar door, slammed it shut with my good foot, found myself in a different corridor than before. The building had changed, rearranged itself, while I was down below. Blood loss made me dizzy. The walls pulsed. I followed instinct, dragging myself toward what felt like air, like outside. I don't remember finding the exit. I remember only Fletcher's face, white with shock, as I collapsed on the cobblestones, babbling about the woman who sang beneath the floors. My knee never healed, but that was the least of what I carried out of that tenement. 3 weeks passed in a haze of morphine and restraints. I woke screaming, throat raw, the hospital walls crawling with shadows that shouldn't move. Nurses whispered when they thought I couldn't hear. Doctors scribbled notes, their faces masks of clinical detachment. Delirium, they said. Post-traumatic hysteria. I tried to tell them about the tenement, the pit, the singing woman. My words came out wrong. Sounds no Englishman should make spilled from my lips. They doubled the sedative. I recall words spoken to me about nobody else finding anything inside the tenement but run-down masonry and rats. They brought in a priest, Father Mallory, grey-bearded, eyes kind but wary. He opened his Bible, began to read from the Psalms. The moment the words touched air, my stomach revolted. I vomited blood, thick, black, steaming on the white sheets. The priest backed away, making sign of the cross. "This is beyond me," he whispered. By the end of the 3rd week, the fog began to lift. I could speak again, could answer their questions with lies they wanted to hear. I'd seen the other patients, struggling against their straitjackets, manic eyes pleading for release. I would not become one of them. Yes, I must have fallen, I claimed. Yes, perhaps I'd imagined things from the pain and shock. No, I didn't still hear the singing. But I did. Always, just behind the wall, just beneath the floorboards. A woman's voice, calling my name in the spaces between heartbeats. Alaric, child of soot and iron. I'm waiting. They discharged me with a cane, a prescription for laudanum, and papers declaring me unfit for duty. Superintendent Blackwood couldn't meet my eyes as he confirmed the end of my duty, but I had expected this, and felt more concerned about the Angel Meadow case, the bones in the tenement, and the missing children. "The case is closed, Uskwood. Official cause accidental deaths, likely from contaminated water." "And the missing children?" "Runaways, common enough in those slums." I protested, Blackwood taking the easy answers rather than being thorough. My complaints drew dark looks from the superintendent, and in my frustration, I threatened to go to the press. Blackwood raised his eyebrows, giving me a look of bemusement before he slid today's newspaper across his desk. The headline burned into my vision. "Uncanny Uskwood, Inspector of Shadows, sees demons in Angel Meadows." "The press has had their fun," Blackwood said. "Best you disappear for a while." There it was. Nobody would take me seriously. Uncanny Uskwood. That would be how I would be known from now on in official circles. Along with a month's severance on the table, and a promise of a token pension each month representing 10 years of service, my police work was ending with a whimper. Only my notebook remained, rescued from the tenement, half its pages charred black. I flicked through what survived. Sketches of symbols I couldn't have invented, words in languages I'd never studied. Proof, if only to myself, that I wasn't mad. I limped home through streets I'd known since childhood. Depressive thoughts overtook me. Manchester, my Manchester, had changed. Or perhaps I had. The city no longer felt solid. Buildings seemed to breathe when I wasn't looking directly at them. Shadows stretched in directions that defied the position of the sun. A woman passed me on Oxford Road, her reflection in a shop window, turning its head to watch me a half-second after she'd gone. I blinked hard, tightening my grip on my new cane. The pain in my knee was real enough, a constant, grinding reminder that whatever happened in that tenement hadn't been my imagination. The pension papers crinkled in my pocket. 32 years old and finished, a ghost wandering among the living. Near St. Peter's Square, I spotted him, a vagrant in a tattered greatcoat, grey-bearded, wild-eyed. He stood at the mouth of an alley, gesticulating frantically at empty air. "Back, I've told you before, this is my patch. I've paid my tithe, salt and silver just as promised." The usual crowd of Manchester rushed past, averting their eyes from the madman. I'd have moved him along, or called for someone to take him to the asylum I almost ended up in. Now I stopped, watched. The way his eyes tracked something moving, the genuine terror in his face. This wasn't the rambling of lunacy. This was negotiation. I approached slowly, my limp announcing me before my voice could. "What do you see there, friend?" He jerked towards me, eyes widening. "You're one of them, dressed up like a toff, but I can tell." "I'm not, but I think I might understand." The man stared, suspicious. Then something behind him moved, a darkness deeper than shadow, sliding along the brick wall. My breath caught. "Christ almighty," the vagrant whispered. "You can see." Before I could answer, he bolted past me, vanishing into the crowd. I stepped into the alley, heart hammering against my ribs. The darkness had gone, but something remained, carved into the brick, half hidden behind crates. Symbols, the same twisted sigils I'd found in that cellar in Angel Meadow. I traced them with trembling fingers, pulled out my notebook, and began to sketch. Behind me, something whispered. A woman's voice, so faint it might have been the wind. "You're beginning to understand, child of soot and iron." I whirled around. Nothing, but the air felt thick, charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. I should have been terrified, should have run as the vagrant had. Instead, I felt a strange, terrible clarity, a purpose crystallizing where there'd been only emptiness. I continued sketching, adding notes in the margins, questions, connections, the beginning of a map. No badge, no authority, no sanction from church or state. Just me, my cane, my notebook, and the weight of unseen eyes upon my back. As I walked home, I felt them. Watches from windows that shouldn't exist, from spaces between buildings too narrow for bodies. Manchester had always been haunted by its dead, the children crushed in cotton mills, the cholera victims in unmarked graves. But there were older things here, ancients that had waited, patient as time itself, for someone like me. For the first time since the tenement, I knew my future purpose. I dipped my pen and finished the last line, and so began my education in things unseen. The ink dried slowly in the damp air of my flat. Through the window, Manchester's spires stood black against the storm-heavy sky. How long had I been writing? The candle had burned low, wax cooling on my desk. My leg throbbed, a familiar dull ache that worsened with the weather. Some wounds never truly heal. I closed the notebook, ran my fingers over the leather cover. A year to the day since the tenement. A year of seeing what others couldn't or wouldn't. A year of collecting scraps of evidence too strange for police archives, of following whispers down alleyways where shadows moved. The letter beside my inkwell, third time I'd read it today. Cream-coloured stationery, elegant handwriting betrayed by ink blots where her hand had trembled. Mr. Uskwood. I write on recommendation of Father Connolly. He says you understand things beyond explanation. Since my husband's passing, I've heard noises behind the nursery walls, scratching, whispering, sometimes crying. My daughter's crying, though she lies silent in my arms. Last night, I found tiny footprints in the dust. They led to the wall and simply stopped. I've had doctors, priests, police. They speak of grief and imagination. Please, if you can help, come to 17 Audiobook Green. With desperate hope, Mrs. Eleanor Caldwell. I folded the letter carefully, slipped it into my coat pocket, my first real case. The whispers had been quiet lately, the shadows still. Almost made me believe I was mad after all. Almost. I gathered my things methodically, checked my pocket watch, ticking slower than it should, its hands dragging as if through water. Slipped my flask into my inner pocket, replacing the brandy from the vial of holy water. My cane leaned against the wall, plain walnut to casual eyes, but hollow at the top, concealing a spike of pure silver. I'd paid a month's pension for it after learning what silver could do to certain things. Rain lashed the windows as I shrugged into my coat. A flash of lightning painted the room stark white for an instant. In that moment, I caught my reflection in the small mirror by the door. Gaunt, hollow-eyed, a ghost of the man I'd been. Then the darkness returned, and something whispered from the glass. Uskwood. Not my imagination, not grief, not madness. The voice was real, the same that had spoken to me in the tenement, that had haunted my fever dreams in hospital. I didn't flinch, didn't turn, simply reached for my bowler hat, settled it on my head, and straightened my collar. I hear you, I said quietly. I've always heard you, but I've work to do first. The voice fell silent, waiting. It had all the time in the world. I opened my door, the familiar creak of hinges, like an old friend's greeting. Below, the clockmaker's shop was dark and silent. Outside, rain hammered the cobblestones, washing the filth of Manchester into the gutters. I stepped out into the downpour, turned up my collar against the chill. My leg protested with each step down the narrow stairs, but I pressed on. Mrs. Caldwell was waiting, and something else was waiting too, behind her nursery walls. The hunt had begun.